I don't often get to stand in front of a shelf of video games, so I thought I would take this opportunity to talk about the state of retro gaming in Japan in 2019. If you'd asked me a couple years ago to make a similar video like this, I would have said, the end is nigh. Soon there will just be no video games left in Japan at all, because people like me are going into the country, scooping everything up, putting it into our bags, and flying out. But I don't think that's exactly the case anymore. I think what's happened is we've reached this equilibrium where some people will come in, they'll pick up a few games that they like because they're kind of expensive now, and they'll go home. All of the staples have kind of leveled off, I want to say. Super Nintendo used to be the hotness. You had games going up from $20 to $30 if they were complete in box. I know Contra went up from, like Super Contra, went from like a $30 game to being like an $80 or even $100 game, complete in box. You've got the super rare PlayStation 1 games, which I did not for a million years ever think that PlayStation 1 games would ever become super rare. But guess what's happened? You've got shooting games like Gaia Seed, which is now a $300 disc game. I never saw that coming, but I probably should have, considering that the PC Engine has a lot of CD games that are like Sapphire, which is like $600, $700 plus. But speaking of the PC Engine, that's a system that I would have thought would have gotten even more expensive as time went on. It's kind of niche, not many people know about it, it didn't have the massive print run like Famicom games did. But the PC Engine, it's plateaued. And I think that's what we're seeing with all of that really old gen stuff. I'm talking Famicom, PC Engine. Master System stuff has really kind of plateaued at a very high price. That's the weird thing about Sega systems in Japan, is that they are so expensive. Not just the systems themselves, but the games. Sega Genesis, I've said this plenty of times in previous videos, but do not collect Japanese Genesis games. The prices on that stuff is out of control. You've got what is like maybe a $100 game in Castlevania Bloodlines. In America, that is a $100 game. In Japan, it is now like a $700 game for like a bad copy completed box. Like a Mandarake C grade, which is probably better than any grade you would find in America, but that's a whole different story. Genesis games are way up. I bet those continue on increasing because there weren't tons of print run and the Genesis did not do well in Japan versus the Super Famicom, where Super Famicom games went up over the last couple of years and then they kind of plateaued. But then we come to the N64, which I thought by now would have really increased in price. But that is not so. You do have some rare games. Neon Genesis Evangelion might be one of those examples of a sort of sought-after game. I don't think this version came out on other consoles, and it's a fine game, but a complete in-box copy has gone up a little bit, but it's not any... None of these games, Neon Evangelion excluded, has really gone up in price. It is still a great time to be a Japanese N64 collector, and especially if we're talking about like cool staples like Mario, all the Mario Party games, which are like $50 plus in America. This is a $10 game in Japan, complete in box. It's absolutely crazy. What else? Even I didn't know I had Luigi's Mansion. GameCube games are still really cheap, and the GameCube is a phenomenal system. This is where I have personally started moving towards collecting and playing GameCube games. That's sort of where, in my personal nostalgia, I'm starting to get to like, late 90s, early 2000s, and now is a fantastic time to buy Japanese GameCube games, because it seems like I'm the only one who wants them. Like the rarest GameCube game you can find, a common, I guess you could say uncommon game would be like Fire Emblem. This is maybe a, at best $50 game. Ikaruga has kind of gone up in price, but I've actually seen GameCube games go down in price since I've been in Japan, which is crazy to me because it's such a phenomenal system. What else have we got going on? PlayStation games. I said before, the rare stuff for this is really heating up. There's a lot of like horror games that I probably, visual novels that I wouldn't even understand, those have really gone up in price. Those are easily going $100 plus. Shooting games, once again, $200, $300. But the base, like the super common stuff, not moving at all. You can still find some really cool staple PlayStation 1 games, including like Mega Man. I mean, Tron Bonne is still like a $30 game in Japan, which is, I mean, that's a super rare, expensive game in America. The Mega Man X games are still cheap. PC Engine, again, not a lot of movement on that. The Dreamcast, we just had the 20th anniversary of the Dreamcast in Japan, and this year, 2019, September 9th, 1999, we will have the 20th anniversary in America. And so in Japan, Dreamcast games have moved. I've seen games double in price. Napple Tale is an example. Oh my God, when we talk about Neo Geo CD games, you couldn't have given these things away 5 years ago. Like, the consoles themselves were so cheap, like even the CD-Z wasn't that expensive. Now we've got not only the games, but the consoles are becoming so expensive. I've seen Neo Geo CD, back when I was collecting the Neo Geo CD, that was maybe like a $60 console, complete in box. I now see it going for $200 plus. And that's not even the CD-Z. The CD-Z is like a $500 console if you can find it complete. It's easily a $250, $300 console loose, which is crazy because no one wanted this 5, 7 years ago. The Sega Saturn has definitely gone up in price, although it's stabilized, and I've seen a lot of games actually decrease in price. For example, Battle Garega, my favorite shooting game of all time, that used to be a $200 game. Now it's like $150. So I don't even know what's going on with the Sega Saturn. I think, again, the rare stuff for this is going to be super rare, but Guardian Heroes, super cheap for the Japanese version. Anything else? PlayStation 2 games, I think, have not really moved a ton. There are some very rare shooters for it that are going for like $200. I think there's a couple Taito shooters that I would really like to get, but I don't know if I want to pay $200 for a PlayStation 2 game. Again, PlayStation 2 games, or the consoles themselves, are really expensive, going for $100 or more if you can find it in the box. So I don't know what's going on with that noise. Really, the stuff to buy now, if I could give my recommendations for you. Personally, it's the GameCube. Prices haven't moved on it. Very cool system. But we are now in the trough of, I want to say, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and Wii games. I have seen the Red Mario edition of the Wii console. That has increased in price recently, but none of the games have really moved at all. So those are only going to move. I think we're going to have a Famicom moment with the Wii. PlayStation 1 and 2, that is actually something that I cannot really foresee. PlayStation 1 games have gone up in price, but I don't know if we're going to have that Famicom. Like, Famicoms are like still like $140 plus, sometimes loose, sometimes in the box. I don't think we'll see that with the PlayStation because those seem to have kept around. There were so many of them produced, even probably more so than the Famicom, although I'm not really sure on those numbers. So I think you're still safe to collect PlayStation and PlayStation 2 games. But I'm not really the expert on those games, so just take that with fair warning. Overall, you can find games in Japan. You just gotta look a little bit harder than you did before. It's not, you can't just go to Akihabara anymore. Even back in 2012, when I first went to Japan, it was still difficult to find games back then, but it is so much harder now. If I'm gonna give you my recommendations for where you should visit in Tokyo, as always, it's by a mile or by a kilometer, depending on where you are. It's gonna be Trader and Friends. The last time I went to Tokyo, those were the only places that I bought games. Super Potato is fine. It's really treated like a museum. Look, but don't touch. I want to say Mandarake has some very interesting games. If you can find the C-graded games, you're going to be your sweet spot because they're going to be cheap and they're still going to look better than what you're going to find here in America. And then there's a couple of other stores. Surugaya Specialty Store. I didn't really like the quality of the games that they had there, but hey, they still had games. Now your hard-offs The junk sections are still incredible. I'm still blown away by some of the stuff that I find there. Again, I don't find as much as I used to, but them's the breaks. Supply and demand, there's only a finite amount of supply of this stuff, and there's just more and more demand. Although I don't think we are going to see as rapid an increase in demand for Japanese games, and thus an increase in prices overall, as we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. The bubble's over, folks. We are now in the plateau. I don't know if prices are going to go down, but I don't see that happening anytime soon, especially because having been to a couple of stores here in America, I am blown away by the amount of Japanese games that I see in these places. Sometimes you have a better selection of Japanese games at these retro stores than you do the English North American versions, which is crazy to me. I didn't even expect that would ever happen. But here we are. It's easy enough to go onto eBay to find these things. There are now shops, online stores that specialize in Japanese games. So it's now easier than ever to collect Japanese video games. And I highly recommend you take the plunge. In the year 2019, it is easier than ever to find these games in America, online, and even if you go to Japan, you're still going to find your staples for much cheaper than you will find the North American versions. That's been my opinion on the state of Japanese video games in the year 2019. I've been your man, a little bit outside of Japan, just for a few weeks. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and mahalo.